Thanks, Joe, Rob, and Jeff. Now that we all have the latest on the tech behind parachains and where it stands, let's talk about how you actually get a parachain. See, Polkadot's architecture is brand new. The ability to own your own shard on a network like this is revolutionary for many reasons, but the fact that it allows, because of the fact that it allows us to cleanly segment and allocate bandwidth on the network, which is really a new innovative approach to sharding that will allow us to build optimized, customized blockchains and secure them to Polkadot. In order to allow these parachain slots to be acquired fairly and permissionlessly, we use an innovative twist on an old auction style called the candle auction, which Sean will explain. In this next talk, Parity core developer Sean DeBreezy will let you know everything you need to know about how your parachain community can acquire its place on the relay chain. You're up, Sean.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, we have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. I do warn, I have been known to talk a little bit fast in the past. I'll try to keep it slow, but I apologize in advance. But yeah, I'm very excited to share with you everything about auction, crowdloans, and slots. So yeah. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Sean DeBreezy, and I'm one of the core developers working on Substrate and Polkadot. I learned about Ethereum back during my time at Microsoft, and I immediately became obsessed with smart contracts in the blockchain world. I was looking for opportunities to continue to innovate in the blockchain space, so I actually quit my job at Microsoft to join Parity Technologies about 3 years ago. I'm one of the developers that designed and implemented the auction and crowdloan system, so again, I'm really excited to share with you all about it and actually to have you use it in the very near future. But before we jump in, let's review a little bit about Polkadot and what it offers. I guess first thing to note is that Polkadot really is a vision towards a multi-chain future. But let's break down what that actually means. If we look back a little over 10 years ago, we had the creation of Bitcoin, which is really the first public blockchain and the only chain of relevance at that time. It wouldn't be for another 6 years until Ethereum went live and provided a platform for multiple different teams to build their products on blockchains as well. Ethereum was really the start of a multi-token future, with people launching their own tokens, building smart contracts, having them interoperate with each other. But we've seen firsthand that this kind of structure doesn't really scale well. If we look at the current blockchain landscape, we find there are instead many, many teams building layer 1 blockchains with specific functionality in mind for the problems they're trying to solve. And this is where Polkadot comes in. Polkadot is actually a layer 0 blockchain, which can connect together these layer 1 solutions pretty much unlike anything we've seen in the past. And we believe that the future of Web3 will have many blockchains, and that Polkadot really is a platform which will facilitate and enable that vision. But the multi-chain future is not a really easy one to reach. There's ultimately a bootstrapping problem. I mean, the blockchain community today is not that big yet, and each new layer 1 blockchain that goes live kind of pulls from the same pool of people to try to build up support. Teams can struggle to get backers for their project, recruit node operators that secure their chain, and the chains themselves have to basically struggle to support interactions with existing and even future blockchain systems. It's a problem that's very, very hard to solve. Polkadot solves the resource problem by providing shared security to all the parachains. So Polkadot itself will incentivize and collect validators who will be assigned to different parachains and validate their state transitions. This means that when you join the Polkadot network, that we basically provide to you Bitcoin-level security to your chain at basically no additional cost. And then, of course, Polkadot also solves the problem of cross-chain communication and blockchain interoperability. Whereas the blockchain world is much like the Wild West, you have everyone designing their blockchain protocols basically on the back of a napkin. Polkadot provides a clear, upgradable, and scalable standard for parachains. So with tools like XCM and XCMP, every single parachain on Polkadot will immediately get access to interoperate and communicate with their peers. And with bridges, of course, to things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, Polkadot will serve as a gateway to all the information available on the decentralized web. But not everything is sunshine and rainbows. Unfortunately, even Polkadot has its own resource limitations. Adding new parachains to Polkadot is itself an exponential scaling problem. So there's really only a limited number of parachain slots we can actually give out and have run on the relay chain. We do have a long-term plan for how we're going to solve this scaling problem through the use of nested relay chains. So you can imagine a chain similar to Polkadot, a relay chain, but connected to Polkadot as a parachain. And so if you can imagine nesting these, you can continue to scale this decentralized network. But that's for the future. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about kind of how we select the lucky parachains that will connect to Polkadot network today. So for that, we're going to talk about slots. Let's go for it. So slots is the term we use to describe availability for a parachain to connect to Polkadot. Optimistically, we think that up to about 100 parachains could be supported at a single time on Polkadot, and for that we would need 100 slots. Now, not all parachain slots are created equal. There will be somewhere between 10 and 30 what we call common good chains. These are basically parachains which serve a utility to the whole Polkadot ecosystem. So you have things like bridges to Bitcoin and Ethereum, utility chains like Statement, which will act as a multi-asset parachain for the whole ecosystem, and even system-level parachains, which will move logic off the relay chain. I think Rob talked about this a little bit in his last talk, but things like balances, staking, and governance, we can move those to parachain systems and free up resources on the relay chain, so the relay chain can focus all of its energy on providing the best services to the parachain ecosystem. And then, of course, there'll be around 40 to 90 lease slots, which will be auctioned off. This is the main focus of this talk, so I'll go more into that detail later. And finally, we aren't going to get to 100 slots overnight. Instead, what we'll look to do is actually slowly ramp up the network by introducing new slots and new parachains over time. As long as we're seeing stability on the network, you can expect us to continue to open up and scale new slots, but it's not something that's going to happen just instantly. So the question is then, how do we open up new slots? And for that, we need auctions. So auctions on Polkadot are basically auctions for a parachain slot. Each of these slots will actually be for 2 years in length, and they're broken up into 8 pieces called lease periods. And each of these lease periods will be 3 months long. This means actually in an auction, you can have up to 8 winners. You can imagine that every single winner gets a different section of this 2-year period. Or you can have a situation where a really good bid bids for all of the lease periods, and then one parachain gets the entire 2-year slot. But basically, every auction provides 2 years of availability on Polkadot for you to bid for. On Kusama, this is going to be a little bit shorter. So the slot duration here is only 48 weeks, which is approximately 1 year. And then the lease periods are only 6 weeks long. And of course, we do this a little bit faster on Kusama because it's a canary network for Polkadot. And so we want to see all of these state transitions of parachains and stuff happening more quickly, to make sure that everything's running smoothly and that we're expecting everything we expect. Now, there's a lot of different ways we can approach the auction system, but we actually settled on a candle auction system. The candle auctions were popularized in the 17th and 18th century as an alternative to the English auction. So you probably are familiar with English auctions, where basically each person bids higher and higher until no one wants to bid anymore. The candle auction adds to this process a little bit of randomness. So you can imagine an auctioneer would actually light a candle and then start the English auction process. Everyone would be bidding, but if the candle ever went out, the auction would immediately end, and even if there were more potential bids, whoever made the last bid would win. This means no one exactly knows when the auction would end. And because of that, the process encourages bidders to make each bid as if it was their last. And this, of course, encourages really healthy price discovery early and discourages last-minute sniping. So, people jumping in last minute, making a huge bid and throwing off all of the economics. Now, if you're familiar with blockchain systems, you would know that anything involving randomness is not very easy. So this is actually how we implemented the candle auction system on the blockchain. So the auction is broken up into 2 main parts. First, we have an opening period, which is right after when the auction has started. And this allows some teams to collect themselves, to set up their initial strategy, make initial bids, and to see who the competition is. And then we quickly transition to an ending period, where the auction could end at any time and the winners are decided. But the way that we manage the random ending is basically we actually go through the entire ending period, and each block during the ending period, we capture a snapshot of the current winners. We keep that snapshot all the way till the very end, and then after the entire ending period is over, we actually retroactively generate some randomness using a verifiable random function to then select which of the snapshots was actually the end time of the auction, and of course who the winners are. That means that even though during the auction process there may have been better bids than the selected snapshot, that snapshot, which we randomly selected, will be what we use to select who the actual winners of the auction are. So it's also very important to note that when you bid in an auction, you use dots, but you're not actually spending those dots to win an auction. You actually just lock them up for the duration of a slot, which means that when the slot is over and your parachain is off boards or wants to continue later, you get all of your tokens back. So when tokens are locked up, you can't do things like staking or voting or transfer or anything like that. But that also means really the only cost for being a parachain is actually an opportunity cost. So basically, when you're bidding in a parachain auction, you're saying that the value you can bring to yourself and to the network is more than what you could get for staking, for example. And so it's really, I mean, it's super exciting to know that you can become a parachain and not really have to spend any funds. Now, bidding is a little bit more complex than you might think. So let's look at a hypothetical snapshot from the ending period, which I've shown here. So you can see there isn't just one bid with one winner, but actually multiple bids happening at any time. Remember, the slot is broken up into 8 lease periods. So when you have bids, any bidder can select among those lease periods which ones they want. You can see Alice at the top is bidding for all 8 lease periods and is willing to lock up 200 dots for that. Whereas Bob only wants lease periods 1 and 2 and is only willing to lock up around 100 dot. Now, when we actually evaluate everyone's bid, we don't take it at face value. We actually increase the locked value based on the amount of time they've locked it up for. So you can see if Alice is bidding for 8 lease periods and is willing to lock up 200 dots, those 200 dots will be locked up for a full 8 lease periods. So the locked value is 2 times 8, 1,600 dots in locked value. Again, Bob, only with 100 dots for 2 lease periods, only has 200 dots in locked value. On top of that, we actually pair bidders with each other so that we can fully saturate the lease periods. So you can see that Alice, of course, would satisfy all 8 lease periods by herself, but Bob and Charlie would need to combine themselves together in order to completely saturate the full 8 lease periods. So we'll actually look at Bob and Charlie's bids together when we're making the final evaluation. And then if we look at the final evaluation, we sum up all the locked values, we would see that in this auction, Bob and Charlie will be the actual winners. And if we look, neither Bob nor Charlie actually made the highest bid, but it was the fact that their overall locked value was the highest that allowed them to become the winner. Does this make sense? Right? Cool. And so then now we understand how auctions work, let's chat about Crowdloans, which is, I think, one of the most exciting things that we can definitely offer in this presentation. So what are Crowdloans? So Crowdloans is a fundraising system for parachain teams to get the dot needed to win parachain auctions. Basically, dot holders can loan parachain teams tokens, which will be used to bid in these parachain auctions. To encourage users to loan tokens to them, parachain teams can create incentives. Basically, a common example of this might be distributing their own token to the Crowdloan participants. Of course, this is only a loan, right? So just like the auction process, all Crowdloan participants, all dot holders, will get back their original contributions at the end of the slot. We guarantee this with the logic on chain. Thus, participating in a Crowdloan is, again, just a cost of opportunity and something you definitely want to do. So what does this mean? This means that Crowdloans on Polkadot means that you don't have to have big pockets to become a parachain, just big ideas. If you provide the great ideas, a solid engineering team, a little bit of hard work, Polkadot will provide you everything you need to get to production. I mean, we've already talked about the shared security it provides to the different teams, but now it's clear the protocol even supports collecting the funds needed to win these slots via Crowdloans. And then as a dot holder, Crowdloans are an amazing way for you to shape the future of the network. You can back the parachain teams which you think will provide the greatest value. You can even get some of the parachain tokens or other rewards along the way. And remember, all of you get them personally invested in your success as a parachain. So it really is a win for everyone. So now that we've covered all the basics of slots, auctions, Crowdloans, let's see what you should expect when we actually go through this process. Besides a little bit of chaos, of course. So here's a general auction timetable and give you an idea of kind of where we are and what you should expect in the near future. So at the high level, you saw last Thursday, we onboarded and got the Shell parachain running on West End. On Friday, we actually upgraded Kusama to support all of the parachain registration, auction, Crowdloan process. So that's already there on Kusama. Then this Monday, we actually onboarded the Shell parachain to Kusama as well. The next steps will be coming soon, which involves upgrading the Shell parachain to StateMine, which is basically the assets parachain for Kusama. It's like Statement, but it's for Kusama. And then when that is running well and stable, we will announce the official auction schedule. And of course, give you all 7 days notice so that you can unbod your KSM if they're currently being staked. The auctions on Kusama will be 7 days long, with a 2-day opening period and a 5-day ending period. This should give everyone plenty of time to both set up their bids and their Crowdloans, and for participants to join the Crowdloan process and the auctions on Kusama. The auction schedule tentatively, we're looking to start with around 5 auctions, each done one at a time, and each 1 week apart. Now, since the auction length itself is 1 week, these auctions will basically be back to back to back. Each auction will target the current lease period. So as soon as a winner is picked in an auction, you will start seeing that parachain immediately start to onboard, and you basically should have that parachain building blocks that day, which is like, I mean, kind of crazy to think about how close we are going to be to parachain teams really launching on Kusama. For participating in Crowdloans, we have the Polkadot.js apps, which will provide you basically all the tools and things you need to participate in a crowdloan. Now, hopefully, you all are very familiar with the Polkadot.js apps already. So if you go to the network tab, then parachains, then crowdloan, you should be able to see all the active crowdloan for potential parachains. Here you can observe the different options and configurations for each of the crowdloans. This isn't all the material. Probably you'll get additional material from the actual parachain teams, talking about the incentives, participation, and types of change to their reward curves or anything like that. But that combined with the information on the crowdloan dashboard should provide you all the information you need to make an informed decision. So let's take a quick look at the screen. You can see here that there are 4 crowdloans. Bob's is already completed because Bob has already reached the limit of the amount of funds that he was looking to raise for his crowdloan. So there aren't any more contributors allowed in that. But you can see that Charlie, Dave, and Alice still have crowdloans going on. And each of them have different lease periods which they're bidding for. And of course, also a different ending time for the crowdloan. So this ending time is very important to note because when you contribute to a crowdloan, you're kind of saying, my funds will be locked in this crowdloan process until either the crowdloan wins, and then of course your funds will be locked until the parachain offboards, or until the crowdloan is ended, and then you can contribute into a different spot. So you need to take into account the different ending times for these crowdloans before you participate. And then of course you can see how much they're looking to raise and how much they've already raised. And this could inform you on decisions like, if they're trying to distribute their tokens, how much of the tokens you might get based off a contribution you would make. And then, of course, once you've got all the information, you made an informed decision, you can just press that very easy contribute button on the right-hand side, and then say how many dots or KSM you want to contribute, and press OK, and that's it. It is really that easy to contribute to a crowdloan. Keep going. Yeah, and so after the crowdloan contributions are made and the bids are made, we actually need to go pick a winner. And depending on what stage in the auction process, the current winner will show up differently. So if you're trying to look and follow the auction process, it's important to know what the different kind of winner snapshots may look like. So during the opening period, the winner view will be very simple. Basically, whoever has the highest bid for a particular lease period section will be listed. If someone bids higher or a crowdloan gets more funds, you'll see that an old name disappear and a new name pop up. This is very, very simple. But then we'll move into the ending period. And remember, the ending period has these different snapshots for all the different changes of bids. So you'll actually see multiple groups of winners with the block number associated with that snapshot. So as people make new bids, new snapshots will appear, and you'll kind of get this list of all the different possible states for winners. Any of these snapshots could be the potential winner for the whole auction. We won't know until the ending period is over. Finally, once the auction has completed and the randomness seed is generated to pick the winner, we actually pick the snapshot. The winners decided, we run the algorithm and decide who are the best candidates for that snapshot, and then you will actually assign the lease periods. And so you can see on this screen, we have Bob and Charlie who won that auction, and their lease periods are assigned to them. And even the parachain itself may start to onboard if the lease period is current. So now that we've covered all the basics of crowdloans and auctions, let's go over some of the do's and donuts. First, you definitely do want to listen for announcements to unbot and stake your staking KSM or DOT when it comes time to start participating in these auctions. And you absolutely want to investigate and research the parachain teams before contributing to any of them. Remember that this is a completely open and permissionless process. So you could expect there probably will be teams with malicious intent out there trying to lock up your KSM in some not worthwhile auction. So in order to get to where we got today, we've worked with a lot of different test networks like Rococo, and we've had plenty of opportunity for the teams to show the world that they have everything running and working smoothly. So definitely you want to make an informed decision and do research on these teams to figure out how have they been doing with the Rococo testnet and setting up their code and the incentives they're trying to provide, right? You definitely don't want to transfer tokens to another person to participate in the crowdloan process. You basically, it should be done by you directly on chain. And also, you definitely don't want to lock up all of your funds in the first crowd loan. Remember that many teams will be doing crowd loans, and those crowd loans may start at different times. If you lock up all your funds in the first crowd loan, you won't have funds to contribute to the other one. So definitely think ahead of time about the parachain teams, about the allocations you want to make, and make sure that you're distributing your funds in a way that makes sense and allows you access to all the different opportunities that Polkadot can provide to you. Yeah. So to recap, we talked about parachain slots, allowing layer 1 blockchains to access the Polkadot ecosystem. Auctions, which is the mechanism used to determine which parachains will actually get one of these limited slots. Crowd loans, of course, a mechanism which allows DOT holders to not only shape the future of the network, but also get a piece of the action of this growing Polkadot ecosystem. And so it should be clear now why Polkadot is the best platform for the Web3 future. I mean, we've designed it to attract the best and most innovative engineering teams. We've minimized the requirements needed to get to production, and we've fostered an active and diverse community who can directly participate and shape the ecosystem. I mean, really, what more can you ask for? And I guess I will find out what more you can ask for because I'll be taking questions with Peter now. So thank you for thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Yeah, of course.
We have a few questions, a few things that you sort of touched on a little bit that we can go into a little bit more deeply. I think the first one everyone's asking is like when parachain. So you sort of explain the process. We're going to get state mine, have this shell upgraded to like the full first parachain on Kusama.
Yeah.
So like, where are we with that, and how long after that will we know what the auction schedule looks like?
My understanding is that actually we have a PR ready to be. And if that's looking good, we will, of course, as soon as we can, upgrade to the state mine parachain. That will be really exciting. Of course, it'll be not only a new tool for the ecosystem to use, but a way for us to check the stability of the network and make sure that when we onboard future parachains, that they're not going to hit any roadblocks. Once we feel confident there, you should expect to see the auctions announced, the schedule, and then we can start things right away.
Imminent, I do believe, is the.
I think I put on my slide soon, trademark.
Classic crypto nomenclature, soon.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting questions here in the chat. Should be actually pretty straightforward. One's actually interesting, and you can touch on this concept of common good parachains. Someone asked, do parachains have a 2-year life maximum? For example, if the Ethereum bridge was auctioned as a parachain, it would only have a 2-year life. Wouldn't this cause huge instability to the ecosystem?
It's a great question. So the common good parachains actually have a different type of onboarding process than what we've described here today. So I've described the auction process, which is a public system for any parachain team to collect funds and get a slot. But fortunately, Polkadot has a very active and very strong governance system. And through governance, we can actually go ahead and evaluate common good parachains and onboard them directly and skipping the entire auction process. So things like bridges to Polkadot and Ethereum, of course, they're going to be relevant for years to come. We will continue to support them through governance motions and make sure that they have a parachain slot. This is the same thing we're doing with StateMine, with other system-level parachains. All of those things, we have a mechanism through governance to enable those slots.
Yeah, that's great. And I think someone will probably drop into the chat a blog post written by Joe Petrowski on common good parachains, sort of describing the parameters, what that means. They'll sort of permanent chains that aren't really ever going to go anywhere, providing this basic level functionality. So whether it's offloading the staking from the relay chain because we want more parachains, offloading balance transfers of DOT onto a parachain because we don't want it on the relay chain, and then more sort of broad utility chains like Statement, which will allow anyone to mint assets. There's some conversations around like basic smart contract parachains just to have I think one of the examples or analogies that's been used before is like when you get an iPhone, it has Apple Maps on it. No one uses Apple Maps necessarily, but it's always going to be there. So if you get a fresh phone and you're lost, you're going to have a Maps app, you're going to have a calendar app, you're going to have email. So the base level functions that you might want out of one of these ecosystems will always be there, but there's nothing then to stop a community parachain team from taking that to the entirely new places that we didn't expect from the baseline. I would definitely also check out Joe Petrowski's talk tomorrow on common good parachains in the stage 1 after our initial conversation tomorrow.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit, I think that this is actually one of the great things we can start talking about right now, which which is, like, what kinds of things do the community see as valuable common good parachains? And are there even opportunities, for example, for a parachain who has won a slot to provide so much value to the ecosystem that maybe transition to become a common good chain? Like, these kinds of things are, very valuable questions and discussions we can start having already in our governance systems.
Yeah, key point being common good chains generally have to operate, the token that are sort of powering them generally would have to be DOT or KSM. So
Exactly.
Could get a little bit sticky for parachain teams that launch with a native token and then say, hey, I want to be a common good chain now. There's like probably a little bit of a bigger conversation that they'd have to have with their own community. But regardless, like an entirely new set of concepts and trade-offs that we're all going to discuss as a community. So really excited getting into that over the next couple of years. Here's a good one about sort of making sure that you're staying safe. Obviously, like you mentioned, there's crypto, there's scammers everywhere. There's obviously a lot of enthusiasm around Polkadot. So those who have less than great intentions are likely to either use the brand or lack of deep knowledge around these processes early on to try to take advantage of people. So this anonymous attendee asked, I guess the account you use to support a crowd loan needs to be super secure, right? As you won't be able to move the funds if your keys get compromised.
So that could vary depending on the crowd loan process. So one of the things I didn't mention, but we have as a feature in the crowd loan process is a memo. And so we actually have tentative parachain teams like Moonbeam, for example, which aren't using the standard substrate cryptography and are using Ethereum cryptography. So the question might be like, if you contribute with a Polkadot account, how are we going to map that to your Ethereum account on the Moonbeam network, right? And so we have this additional memo field where if the parachain team supports it, you could put into that the actual target address that you would want to have the funds minted to for that parachain token, and the funds will actually go there. Now that of course will vary on a per chain team, but that's one way you could mitigate or maybe separate the different keys you're using. Of course, just like any other key, you definitely want to keep the key you use for a crowd loan secure, because again, when the crowd loan is over, all the funds will be returned to that key. So that's definitely very important. And then beyond, other things to keep safe, I think we actually have a really great blog post. I'm sure someone will post it in chat for things you should watch out. So the only thing I can really say to keep safe as an overall thing is, of course, managing your keys, but also doing good research into these teams. I mean, all the teams that are part of the Polkadot ecosystem are active, and they communicate well with the community, and they have shown evidence of the fact that they're going to be successful on Polkadot when it happens. So
Rococo is key.
Exactly. So basically, you need to just do your due diligence. Don't ape into every single thing. Make sure that you feel confident in what you're doing, and you know that where you put your dots is actually a vote. You're really shaping the ecosystem. So it's not about just putting it everywhere. It's about where do you want to see the first parachain teams and the first Polkadot kind of evolution to happen. Like, you can push people in that direction with your tokens.
Voting with your stake in the network, the direction you want to take it in is very interesting, and it's really completely new. I like the ideas like just don't ape into this. Actually think about it. I know a lot of crypto enthusiasts out there are used to this DeFi, just throw it in and hope something comes out. I would really hope that people think a lot, because that's the other point you mentioned was really important. Is like, if you have all your DOT in the first crowd loan and that team wins, is like that's it for you. And that may be the right choice for you if you're really a huge supporter of one of these early parachain projects. But I would say worth not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, even though you do get your eggs back at the end of the...
Yeah, but again, you get it back, but it's going to be a while. Like if a parachain wins a slot, and assume they win all 8 lease periods, it's going to be a year before you see those dots again, right?
So this leads into another good question someone had. So if the company you've contributed to, or like I say, the parachain community that you've contributed to in their crowd loan loses the auction that they're going for, what happens? So maybe you can talk a little bit about like a crowd loan could be for multiple auctions or what? And if eventually they don't win at all, what happens after that?
Right. So I had mentioned that we're tentatively thinking about doing about 5 auctions to start with, and they'll all happen for the current lease period. So basically, all the teams could basically create their crowd loans as a 5-week crowd loan, and then as long as they set their lease periods correctly, you can imagine that basically contributions to any of those crowd loans would try to participate in every auction. So it may be that a crowd loan doesn't win the first auction, but as long as it's still active, it hasn't ended yet, again, they can set the end date, it can actually bid in the next auction, the next one after that. So these different crowd loans can actually span multiple different auctions. Now, if a team wins one of the auctions with a crowd loan, immediately those funds get locked, and you're basically locking your funds for the duration of the parachain slot. But if over the entire crowd loan period they don't win anything, those funds are immediately unlocked to you, and you can start contributing in the next set of crowd loans whenever those happen again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess one thing that's important is that you do need to take into account, again, that ending date of the crowd loan. So when you contribute funds to a crowd loan, you're basically saying, no matter what the outcome could be, the minimum amount of time I'm going to lock up my funds is the duration of that ending period.
So you may, if the community, the parachain team you want to support doesn't win the auction, you're going to have to be sort of on top of it and say, all right, they've opened up a new crowd loan, contribute funds to the new crowd loan or other crowd loans so that you're able to participate if and when they do actually win the slot.
Exactly.
Here's an interesting one I haven't gotten before. Pretty simple to answer, but worth asking.
Okay.
How does the staked dot in a crowd loan, or I should say, the bond, does it contribute to the market cap of the parachain? And if not, how is the parachain's market cap understood?
Yeah, so that's kind of a hard,
I think the short
question.
answer is no,
So,
it doesn't.
it
but
doesn't,
it could have some influence over the overall Polkadot ecosystem and network, which then is potentially has some impact on how parachain, the value of parachains broadly in the market is seen.
So again, because the tokens you lock up in the auctions get returned to the users, it's not quite fair to say like I locked 10 DOT into this crowd loan and I got minted 10 whatever, and that has one-to-one backing, because at some point those 10 DOTs will be returned to the user, and you still have those those parachain tokens.
Yeah.
So it's up to the parachain teams to derive their own value by contributing valuable code and resources to the network. Now, of course, market caps are decided by lots of open ecosystems and economies and stuff like that. But it wouldn't be right to say that's like a one-to-one mapping between the dots that are locked up for a parachain and the value of that parachain itself. The value of the parachain will be derived from the value it brings to the network.
Yeah. So here's an interesting one, and maybe we can use this before we wrap up to talk about some of the wilder scenarios.
Okay.
So there's a couple here.
Wild.
One is will teams be able to stack parachain auction slots? So imagine a very well-funded team with a really big community. Their slot is coming into an end, so they pre-bid for a slot.
Yes.
So there's overlap, so they always have a full parachain slot. And if not, I think maybe you could touch on the use of a pair thread in between that.
Of course, yeah. So I mean, what you mentioned is exactly right. So basically, onboarding and offboarding parachains is kind of a scary thought. Imagine one day you have a parachain slot and the next day you don't. That would be kind of weird for the team. Absolutely, we support you winning future auctions for slots you haven't had yet. And if the end of one slot you won and then the beginning of the next slot you won is just next to each other, you would just continue to run continuously. There would be no offboarding, no weird blip or anything, right? You can even imagine that during an auction process, you might not be ready to launch your parachain at the very beginning of the lease period we want. So you're only bidding for, let's say, the last 2 parachain slots, and then when time comes around for more parachain slots and more auctions, you can start bidding for that and basically extend your own lease period to be however long you're able to get it. Now, let's say that for whatever reason, there is some kind of offboarding, so you don't have a continuous lease period. When your parachain slot is over, we will downgrade you back to a pair thread. Now, pair threads, again, aren't really available currently, but hopefully by the time that people start offboarding for the first time, they will be available. And basically, at that point, you can just continue to run your parachain as a pair thread. So you may not get that same availability of making a new block every single relay chain block, but you can still produce new blocks through pair thread auctions. There's just kind of an auction that happens in real time, trying to get access for one of those few pair thread slots. So it's not that if you lose your slot, that immediately your chain is dead. It's very much, we have a plan for people to be pair threads, to transition off, and then wait till they get another parachain slot and onboard on again. This is a really great story of what pair threads can provide to the network.
Yeah, and a really nice sort of life cycle for a project,
exactly.
Right? We talk about, and I think Derek from Moonbeam might talk about this later today, sort of the path for a team to be a parachain. People think oh, I want to build on Polkadot, I have to build a parachain. That's not actually necessarily true. You can start in a smart contract environment on a parachain, iterate your idea, build a community, and then say, all right, we're ready to build this in a more optimized, efficient manner as a parachain or using Substrate, start out as a pair thread and actually start to sort of prove out your code, and then once you have proven it out and sort of ticked all the boxes, be in a position where the Polkadot community is willing to help fund your crowd loan and get your full slot because they see you as value to the ecosystem, and then voting with their feet, so to speak.
Yeah. Again, it's all about the options. We provide our community lots of options on how they want to participate, interact, and use Polkadot. So those options really allow you to tell whatever story you think is best for your chain, for your community, for your people.
Yeah. Sort of building on the kind of team stack parachains, another person asked, like, how do we prevent people or teams or organizations with really deep pockets from just winning all the auctions and acquiring all the parachain slots for themselves?
Right. So one, that would be very impressive. I don't suspect that getting a parachain slot will be very cheap. And if those guys have that big pockets, then I mean, good for them.
Yeah.
you should call me. But basically, one, you can't reserve more than one slot for a parachain. So if you have a certain parachain ID, which is how you basically back a parachain. So your parachain is represented by ID. This ID is very important. It has like all of your messages associated with it, all of the validators that are selected to help validate your chain, all that kind of stuff. You can't have two slots in the same parathread or the parachain ID. So that team would need to launch multiple different parachains. And if they are able to do that, and all these parachains provide value, then great. I mean, I see that as a positive thing. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a
parachain slots might look like, and at the 80th parachain, people aren't going to be bidding nearly as much DOT because so much will already be locked in the network. A lot of the core functionality for parachains will be running in existing parachains. So again, but all super exciting scenarios that I'm going to really enjoy both watching, analyzing, and hopefully participating in as well.
I'll say, as a runtime developer, one of the exciting things about all of these processes, especially showing them to the world and having you all use it, is that we design these applications with certain incentives in mind to try to encourage certain behaviors. But really, once we put it into your hands, it's kind of we have to guess actually how those incentives actually affect you, and are you actually doing the right kinds of actions that we would want, for example. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are future iterations to this code. And again, with Substrate, with Polkadot, with these forkless runtime upgrades, we're actually able to tweak and iterate on the code here for all of the auction system. So if we find some weird behaviors, it's nothing that we can't solve, right? Once we've identified them.
The beauty of on-chain governance.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Sean, thank you so much for dumping everything you know about Crowdloans, slots, and auctions. Oh my. We're going to take a short break, and when we're back, we're going to hear from our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.